Hi everybody, welcome to Dulcimerica. My name is Futch. Thank you very much for joining me for another look at this beautiful American instrument. Today we're going to be looking at how to move through all of the different instances of chords, different chord shapes, how to find them across the fretboard, and use some exercises to get yourself used to bouncing back and forth. And I think you'll find this stuff a lot of fun, very fascinating, and very helpful down the road. But before we go there, I want to say hello to one of my new patrons on Patreon, Carol Fleck. Carol, thank you very much for joining in on the fun and the community. I appreciate you, and I hope you're having a blast out there with everything you can find in the Patreon vault. All my books, all my CDs, all of my videos, all my tablature, everything I've been doing for the past 15 years in the mountain dulcimer scene is available. And if you have any questions to find anything, you can just drop me a line at bingfutch@yahoo.com. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all my patrons for being a part of my art and helping me to do things like Dulcimerica and create new fun for everybody who loves playing the mountain dulcimer. So Carol, again, thank you very much. And if you are out there wondering what this whole Patreon thing is all about, it's basically a subscription service, and for $5 a month, you can get everything I've ever produced, everything that I just mentioned above, plus everything I'm creating right now. So if you're curious about all that, check out patreon.com/bingfutch. Go to the featured tag section, download from the open house area. Everything there is yours to keep, and make sure that you come on back, check us out, and consider becoming a patron like Carol. Carol, again, thank you very much. So here's what we're doing today. I'm going to be bouncing all over this fretboard using a principle that I learned from the great Jerry Rockwell, jcrmusic.com, my music theory guru. Back when I first started getting into teaching myself music theory, Jerry was the guy who tested me and filled me with all kinds of really great info. And one of the things I took away probably the most was the concept of the chord constellation. And I'll put one up here. The chord constellation is a great way of becoming more knowledgeable and more aware of what you have on your fretboard. And so, as I've taught in other Dulcimerica episodes, the first thing you can do to getting close to understanding where all your notes are is by playing the D major scale, G major scale, the A major scale in different locations all over the fretboard in your first octave. So I would start by playing the obvious, up the D strings, bass and melody, and say each name of each of those notes. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. I'll do the exact same thing on the melody string. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Do the same thing on the middle string with A. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And then you come across the strings with D major. So I'll go 4 on the bass string and then 4 on the middle string. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. From G, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. From A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. The only note and the only fret that I didn't touch is the 1.5 fret. And we know that we've got F natural on the bass string and melody string, especially if you watched the last episode. And then we've got C natural on the middle string. That accounts for every single note in the first octave. And once you've got that seared into your brain, you can't unsee it, you can't unlearn it, and that's going to help what we're doing today quite a bit. So let's take a look at what we've got here. We've got 3 different chord shapes. Actually, we've got 4 to work with. We have the L-shaped chord, which for an example, I'll use a G major chord, 3, 3, and 5. L. It's kind of upside down and backwards, but you get the idea. And then from there, we've got the slant chord. So I can just change this like this. Okay, and then now I've got a slant chord running right there. Tic-tac-toe, 3 frets in a row. And then the extended slant, which is going to extend this top note out 1. And then we've got the bar, which is just every note pushed down across the strings, across the fretboard. And technically that's called a root 5 chord because we're not playing a root, a third, and a fifth. We're only playing the root and the fifth, and there is no major or minor third in the middle. And that's just a bar chord pressing down everything going all the way across. I typically use a bar chord and then add in the major third with my thumb to produce the L shape that way. And that way if I ever take my thumb up, I can always run down to that note whenever I need to, and that's just a real important part of making sure that all of your fingers are ready to snap into action when you're playing chords, moving chords around, and playing melody on top of them. So once again, we have our L-shaped chord, slant chord, extended slant, bar chord. So we have 4 chord shapes that we're working with. So that I changed chords. I just showed you the shapes, but I changed chords there from G to E minor to C and then G5. But let's just work with one chord and look at the different chord shapes because they will be in different locations. Let's look at G. So here's 3-1-0. That's an extended slant chord, and if we had another fret over here, we would fret that. But because this string is tuned open, we don't need to. We've got G, we've got B, and D is the open string. If I were to move this up to this, you would see that here's our extended slant. So this is technically an extended slant where we don't have to fret the string on the melody side. So that's G, 3-1-0. Then we've got our 3-3-5 L shape. And then we got a 5-6-7 slant shape. Notice that took us from the bottom of the fretboard or the top of the fretboard, depending on how you look at your instrument. It took us from the nut to the 7th fret with those 3 chord shapes. It's a pretty big spread, but that does give you 3 different chord shapes for the same chord. And why is that important? Because sometimes you might have a melody that's hanging out down here, and it's easy just to use one of those G's that are hanging out down in our first 3 fret range. But what if your melody starts coming up here? It's going to be hard to hold down that G major down here while chasing this melody. But then you can change the L shape. You can get to a different chord shape, and that melody will still be in reach while you can sound that chord. But what happens if you start getting up higher and it's hard to hold down that? Then you can change your chord shape once again. So it just gives you some more options, especially knowing that we can take each one of those chords and we can invert them. So we can go from 3-1-0 to 0-1-3. And from 3-3-5 to 5-3-3. And from 5-6-7 to 7-6-5. We have 6 different options there for each one of the chords, 2 options per chord shape, and then of course the bar. And you just kind of go by what's on the bass string or the melody string to know that that's going to be the bar you want for a G5 chord at the 3rd fret. Now here's one more thing I'll show you, and this is where it really gets interesting. Here we have our G. So those 3 notes are G, B, and D. And those notes are going to be all over the fretboard in all kinds of different configurations. Look at how 3-1-0 and 3-3-5 are connected. They share in common one note right there at the 3rd fret on the bass string. We could still play an inverted chord if we wanted to, but 3-1-0 connects directly with 3-3-5, and that 5 where my thumb is connects directly to 5-6-7, 7-6-5 chord. I'm just reading it backwards. Which means we can start the cycle all over again. Now remember, down here we don't have to fret that one string because it is our open tuning. However, up here we do have to fret all 3 strings And that connects with this. So when you start getting up to this point, all you have to do is go, the top of my chord, the note that I'm pressing down on the strings that's closest to the bridge, is going to be a part of this next chord shape. So all I have to do is piece in the other two. And in this case, it'd be inverted. Now that is our connective note. And so I can go here, here, and here. And by golly, I could just keep going. Look at that. I am way, way up here. That is a 14, 15, 17. Now, many of you are probably not going to play all the way up there, but by golly, I just found every single instance of G major from the very, very bottom of the scale of the octave all the way up, getting into the third octave. That's awesome, and primarily used just this little pattern thing that goes all the way up. Does that work for every single one of these chords? It certainly does. Take a look at D major now. We can do a D major by playing simply 2-0-0. We can then connect that with 2-3-4. We can then connect that with 4-5-7. We can then connect that with 7-7-9. We can then connect that with 9-10-11. And it keeps going. All of these chords are all connected by just that one little dot. So if you're chasing the melody, or if you're simply moving around the fretboard, know that every single chord that you're playing has got a link that goes to another chord shape right next door to that one, in both directions, whether it be this way or going down this way. So you can have a visual reference for knowing where that chord is going to be based on the fact that you've got one shared note per chord shape. So armed with that knowledge, you can now run through all of your different chord shapes for all your different chords and start playing around and having some fun with getting used to moving and getting that muscle memory working together. So let's take D major, for example. I'll start plucking through and doing some arpeggios like this. And all I'm doing is I'm hitting all the Ds, all the F sharps, and all the A's that are in D major and all of those chords. And sometimes I'm playing them as an inverted run, and sometimes I'm playing them as a standard run for us as mountain dulcimer players, but I'm just playing them as individual notes. And if you have already done the study of knowing where all your notes are located and being able to name them, what you can do then is slow it down and say to yourself as you're walking across, F sharp, D, A, F sharp, D. And the more you do that, the more you're drilling those notes to where you know exactly where they are. And that's going to come in handy when you start doing chord building, extended chords, and having to figure out the relationships between notes. It's a real handy thing to do. Same thing with G. And all I'm doing is playing those chord shapes, but I'm playing them one note at a time, arpeggiating through them, and just watching where they go. That's going to help me melodically down the road as I'm picking around things, knowing where all of my lily pad notes are, where all my ones, all my threes, and all my fives. We'll save lily pad chords for another workshop on Dulcimerica down the road there. Do the same thing with A. You can do it as fast or as slow as you want to, as long as you're hitting those notes, and if you want to, even slowing it down more and saying what note it is that you're actually touching at any given time. And follow that trail. Follow that path in the stars. That's where the constellation began. It'll help you to understand more about where all your notes are located and how they form together to create these chords. Where the constellation really comes in handy is when you get into a different tuning, where the intervals across the strings are different. Going between all the different 1/5/8s are not so difficult because you can still use the exact same chord shapes no matter whether you're playing in CGC, DAD, EBE. All the chord shapes are going to be the same. It's when you start getting into other tunings like DGD or DAC or DF sharp A. These are all different tunings that are going to have different intervals, which means the chord shapes are not going to look like the ones that we're working with in 1/5/8 tuning. And so all you have to do with the chord constellation is find out, first of all, what your home key is going to be. And then you can even go on the internet and find out, if this is the home key, what are the naturally occurring chords that I should have. Write those all out, and then chart out what the notes are and where they're located on the fretboard. Once you're done with that, then use the chord constellation and find, for every chord that's possible, find the 3 notes that are inside of that chord and go for each one. When you find each one of those notes, then combine them in the most efficient way possible, as close together as possible, one on each string. And when you find that and connect them all together with lines, you will then be able to see your new chord shapes for that particular tuning. It's an awesome tool, and it was brought to my attention by the great Jerry Rockwell. So thank you, Maestro and Sensei. I appreciate it very, very much. So I hope that helps, and I hope it gives you something to work with. And it's a great finger exercise as well, just from getting from point A to point B on the mountain dulcimer. And the more you do that, the more, athletic you will be on the instrument, and you'll be able to hop all over the place and know exactly where you're going and how you got there. So thanks again for watching, everybody, and we will see you next week.